Hi friends, it's Kirsten. Hi friends, welcome back to another Bible study. Today is a big one. So we are in John chapter 13, verses 18 through 30. There is a lot to unpack here, so let's go ahead and get right in. So just a little backstory about where we left off from our last study is they are sitting down for the Last Supper. It is Jesus and his disciples, and Jesus has just gotten done washing all of their feet. He has sat back down at the table and he's talking to them. So the last thing we read was verses 12 through 17, where he is speaking to them, basically saying that he has given the disciples the example of the way that they should live going forward once he's gone. So we're going to jump right in to verses 18 through 20. Y'all already know I'm going to read these and then we'll dissect them afterwards. Jesus is still speaking, but this passage is separate from the one we had our last study on. And the title for this passage is Preparing for His Betrayal. So if that lets us know anything about what's about to go down, trust me, y'all want to make sure you're following along and you got your notebooks and your pens ready to go. So, starting in verse 18, I speak not of you all. I know whom I have chosen, but that the scripture may be fulfilled, he that eateth bread with me hath lifted up his heel against me. Now I tell you before it come, that when it is come to pass, ye may believe that I am he. Verily, verily, I say unto you, he that receiveth whomsoever I send receiveth me, and he that receiveth me receiveth him that sent me. So first, we're just going to start off with verse 18. And the very end of that, he says, he that eateth bread with me hath lifted up his heel against me. So y'all already know, we go over to Handy Dandy Enduring Word. That is the resource that I use as a website for more understanding and more clarity to actually figure out what we're reading and to break it down a little bit more for us, right? So I'm just going to go ahead and read this one part that Enduring Word said. It is referenced back to the part where it says, lifted up his heel against me. It says Jesus had Psalm 41:9 in mind when he said this. It has the same sense of a treacherous, unexpected attack or taking cruel advantage of someone. It says, in biblical culture, the code of hospitality and a shared table meant that if one who eats bread with me did afterwards lift his heel against me, it was a great betrayal and treachery. So he was referring back to another verse that they already had in their scriptures, right? Psalm is in the Old Testament. And it literally says the same thing about lifting your heel against someone. And he's saying that in their culture, to break bread with someone, to have them sit at a table and eat with you, it was of great hospitality and it was an honor and it was something to do out of kindness and being friends. But if someone were to eat with you and then lift their heel up against you, it meant a great betrayal, something treacherous, something awful. So then going down to verse 20, he says, he that receiveth whomsoever I send receiveth me. And he that receiveth me receiveth him that sent me. So it just further reiterates his point that he's made before about you can't accept God and reject Jesus and vice versa. You can't accept Jesus and reject God. They are one and the same. He's just reiterating that if you receive him, you receive the one that sent him, which is God. So now we're getting into the part of finding out who is going to betray Jesus. And we go from verse 21 to 27. And when I tell y'all that when I read this, I went straight to my grandma, my Gigi, and I went straight to my cousin. I posted on Instagram. If you guys saw my Instagram stories, this shook me. And it's funny to me because if you have any type of knowledge of the story or what goes on in the Bible, you already know who's going to betray Jesus. You already know how this plays out. And I did going into this. But reading these words, like, just shook me. And I was like, oh my gosh. So, going into verse 21, when Jesus had thus said, he was troubled in the spirit, and testified and said, verily, verily, I say unto you, that one of you shall betray me. Now again, let's set the scene. They're having this Last Supper. They're all eating together. Jesus has already displayed this act of humility and washing all of their feet. Obviously, we know that Peter had his little outburst. Luke said he was rather dramatic, but that all happened. Now Jesus is back at the table and he's talking to them. He's basically teaching and preaching to them how he has been during his whole ministry with all the disciples. And then he says 18 through 20. And then 21 says, after he said that, he was troubled in the spirit. We've heard that said in the book of John before, that Jesus was troubled in the spirit. But I feel like in this sense, because of what he was about to let them know, and obviously the events that were going to take place here shortly, it troubled him because, like I said in our last study, I know I used to be one of those people. So many of us hate Judas. We want to pin all the blame on him. We want to say, you're evil, you're awful, you did this, you're guilty, you should be ashamed of yourself. But Jesus loved him. He chose him as one of his disciples. Whether we like it or not, Judas played a key part in the salvation that we were gifted from Jesus. And the fact is, Jesus loved him so much. So to say what he was about to say and what he had just said troubled him in the spirit. It hurt him, I believe. It hurt him so bad to think that one of his own, someone he loved, someone he handpicked and chose to follow him, was going to do this to him, was going to set off this chain of events that ended up with him dying. Now, obviously, we know how the story ends, but again, I think it just really hurt him. And he said to all of his disciples, one of you will betray me. And going to verse 22, then the disciples looked one on another, doubting of whom he spake. So at this point, the disciples understood what he said. You'll get why I'm saying that here in a second. They understood what he said. They were like, someone's going to betray you? Like, who is it? And in the other gospels, all of the disciples were like, is it I, Lord? Is it I? Now here in John, it just says they all looked at one another and they were all just doubting and asking like what is he talking about? Someone's going to betray him? Like, what? So then verse 23, now there was leaning on Jesus's bosom one of his disciples whom Jesus loved. And I love this because automatically we can point out who he's talking about. And John is talking about himself here because I don't even know how many times, but a couple of times, John has referred to himself as being the one that Jesus loved. Okay, just kidding. I forgot that I wrote that down in my notebook. So it says, from Enduring Word, they said, John referred to himself with this phrase, whom Jesus loved, 4 times in his gospel, each connected with the cross in some way. And it said that he hides himself behind the love of Jesus, which proves that John glorified the love of Christ, but did not boast of it egotistically. So it gave us the 4 times. So here in 13:23, it was in the upper room when they were having the feast. Then coming soon, 19:26 at the cross, 20 verse 20 at the empty tomb, and then 21 verse 20 with the risen Jesus at the Sea of Galilee. So 4 times he's referred to himself as the one whom Jesus loved. And I think that was just something super sweet to kind of point out. So then verse 24, Simon Peter therefore beckoned to him that he should ask who it should be of whom he spake. So we all know a little bit about Peter, okay? If you don't know, I'm going to tell you. Peter was the friend you have that has your back and is not afraid to throw hands if need be. Like, he was about Jesus and he was about that life, okay? So at this point, he's like, okay, Jesus says someone's going to betray him in this room. We're all sitting here. I want to know who it is. Like, I just imagine Peter, like, his blood boiling, being like, okay, who's it going to be? Who's going to betray my Jesus? Like, let's talk about it. Let's end it right here. But he didn't go to Jesus and ask him that. Nah. He went to John, whom Jesus loved, remember? And he said, John, can you ask Jesus who he's talking about? Because I need to know, but like, can you ask him for me? I think that's so funny. So then verse 25, he then lying on Jesus's breast said unto him, Lord, who is it? So John went along with what Peter said. He was like, all right, bro, I'll ask him for you. And so the way they were sitting at this table, like I said before, they didn't have chairs. They were kind of like propped up on the floor with pillows. The table was very low to the ground. So what I envision is John is next to Jesus. And he just kind of like rolls over and is able to be close enough to kind of whisper this to him, but enough for like loud enough for Jesus to hear him. And he's like, Lord, who is it? Like, I'm not going to say Peter wants to know, but like, who's going to betray you? So then verse 26 is where things get interesting. Jesus answered, He it is to whom I shall give a sop when I have dipped it. And when he had dipped the sop, he gave it to Judas Iscariot, the son of Simon. So let's break this down just for a second. So a sop is a dipped piece of bread. And Enduring Word kind of let me know that a dipped piece of bread and giving it to someone at a feast like this is considered like an honor. Like think of it today as like a champagne toast. Like, you know, when you click the champagne glass and you're like, I want to give a toast to, like, think of it as like an honor to dip this piece of bread and give it to someone. That's what a sop is. So Jesus basically says, I'm going to dip this piece of bread, and whoever I hand it to, that's who's going to betray me, right? That's pretty obvious. That's pretty self-explanatory. Okay, so in my head, whoever Jesus hands this bread to is the one that's going to betray him. That's common sense to me, I would think. At the end of that verse, it says he dipped the sop, he dipped the bread, and he gave it to Judas. So it was very obvious and very intentional. Jesus said out loud, whoever I give this to is going to betray me. Then he turned and gave it to Judas. So common sense would make you believe that Jesus was saying that Judas was going to be the one to betray him. I would think that's common sense. So now verse 27. This is the verse that I went and shared to my Gigi, to my cousin on Instagram. Like, this is the verse that stood out to me, and I've never heard it in this perspective before. I've never heard these words before, and it got me feeling some kind of way, to be honest. The first few words of verse 27 says, and after the sop, Satan entered into him. Then said Jesus unto him, that thou doest, do quickly. So to me, I would take this as Judas has already been confronted with the idea of betraying Jesus. And he hasn't done it yet, but it has come up. He's aware of this. No one else is but him. And Jesus says, what you're going to do, just go do it. Like, you don't have to say anything. You don't need to just go and make it quick. Like, you're going to betray me. You're going to take I think it's 20 pieces of silver. Go get your silver. Just do it. Because referring back to verse 21, he was troubled in the spirit. Jesus was so hurt by this because he loved Judas so much, like a brother. And he already knew what he was going to do. So he was like, you know what? Just go. Just do it quickly. But the beginning of that verse, and it says, after the sop, so after Jesus handed Judas this dipped piece of bread, Satan entered into him. So going off of our previous studies, I don't remember exactly what verse it was, but Enduring Word let us know that Satan had been cultivating and working on Judas for a hot minute, okay? He had been weaseling his way into Judas's mind, his thought process, his heart, everything he was doing. Satan was in there just like trying to get himself in there to pull the strings, to get Judas to be his puppet, to do what he wanted him to do. And when I read this, I immediately thought back to our story when we read about Mary anointing Jesus's feet. That's where my mind automatically went, because Mary was there doing an act of humility, an act of service for Jesus, a way of showing that she honors him and that she loves him, like a way of presenting him as her king, right? I read that and thought of it as a beautiful moment. But then shortly after, it said that she used the pound of very expensive ointment to anoint his feet. We saw that Judas immediately had a problem with it. I don't know if I would call it jealousy, because we saw that just a little bit. He was like low-key jealous of Jesus and all his popularity and, you know, whatever. But Judas was in charge of the bag. He was the designated treasurer of their group for the ministry. He handled the money. So when this happened, the instance with Mary, he called her out and was like, why didn't we sell this ointment? Like, why didn't we get money for this? Like, why are you using all of this ointment, this expensive ointment, on his feet? Like, we could have sold that, we could have gotten money. And then he tried to save himself by saying we could have given it to the poor. Like, and John clearly called him out and was like, he didn't care about the poor, like he just cared about the money. So I thought back to that, because I was like, Satan was really working on him. Because if I saw someone anointing the feet of Jesus, I wouldn't question the ointment or how much it cost or how much they were using. I would be like, That's beautiful. Jesus, you know what I mean? So it says that after Jesus handed him that bread, Satan completely entered him. So now all this time of him cultivating Judas and working in his heart and planting things in his mind, now like the decision was made. Judas was the man that was going to betray Jesus, and Satan had gotten his full reins on him. But something about reading those 4 words, that Satan entered into him. Like, one thing I said to my cousin, I was like, yo, listen, imagine your name is in the Bible. Like the Bible. Your name is in there. But it says that Satan entered you. Like, we were joking about it at first. We were like, yo, that's embarrassing. First off, we're like, that's embarrassing. But then it was like, that is so harsh. Like, that John would just word it like that. But it's true, because like I said, Satan had been working on him. He'd been working on him, planting those seeds, not the good kind, planting those seeds. And now this just lets us know that, like, there was no stopping Judas. There was no trying to convince him otherwise. There was no act of love or kindness anyone could show him that would make him stop. Like, it was completely in his mind. He made up his mind pretty much that he was going to betray Jesus. And Satan had worked in him, and that was that. But those 4 words, like that verse, got me, like, my mind was completely shook, okay? So then y'all remember just a few minutes ago, okay, when I said that you would think it would be common sense to know that Jesus said, who I hand this bread to is going to betray me. And then he hands it to Judas. So common sense, that's who's going to betray Jesus, right? Or so you'd think. This is why I was like, y'all listen to this. Because verse 28 through 30, to wrap up this Bible study for today, these disciples, man, I don't know if they were just a little bit slow. I don't know if they just genuinely had no understanding or what, but like, I would think that was common knowledge. Jesus made it very obvious, and the disciples didn't get it. It literally right over their head. So verses 28 through 30, I'm just going to read them together. Now no man at the table knew for what intent he spake this unto him. For some of them thought, because Judas had the bag, that Jesus had said unto him, buy those things that we need of against the feast, or that he should give something to the poor. He then, having received the sop, went immediately out, and it was night. So 28 and 29, the disciples didn't get it. They didn't get the point Jesus was making by saying that Judas was going to betray him. They didn't get it. In fact, 28 says no man at the table knew what was going on, pretty much. They didn't know what Jesus was talking about. Verse 29 says that because, like I said, he was a designated treasurer, he kept the bag of money. He was the one that dictated their finances for their group. Some said because he had the bag, that Jesus like told him, you need to buy things that we need for this feast, right? Like maybe we're out of something. Maybe he needs to go out and go buy something. Or that he should go out and give something to the poor. Because as we know from previous stories, they were all about whenever they had extra and they had a surplus of something, they gave the rest to the poor. They gave it out. And so that's what they thought this was. They thought that Jesus was telling Judas to go do something that would benefit the group. Little did they know what he was about to do was going to cause a chain of series of events that were going to completely tear apart the group. God's will, but they were thinking the complete opposite. So then verse 30 just says, after he received the salt, after Jesus gave him that bread, it clicked for him. Like it says in 27, Satan entered into him. Judas had his mind made up. He knew exactly what that meant. Even if the other disciples clearly had no idea what was going on, Judas knew. And it said he took the sop and he immediately left, and it was night. So now we are setting the stage for the following passage for tomorrow's Bible study, and beginning that it is nighttime. Judas has left. Jesus is still with the disciples, all but Judas, and they still have no idea what's going on. Judas knows, and that's why he got up and he dipped out, because he was probably at this point, I would want to say, guilty and shameful and stuff, but he doesn't feel that yet, because Satan is literally inside of him and pulling the strings. And so now he has his mind made up and he's going to go betray Jesus. So tomorrow, we're going to pick up in verse 31. The title of this passage is Peter to Deny Jesus. It's a very short passage, so tomorrow's video will be very short. It's only 8 verses, but that's kind of where we're going to pick up at tomorrow. This is where we left off at today. Judas is gone. He's made up his mind. Satan has entered into him. He's going to go betray Jesus. So there is a lot to unpack there. And verse 27, I don't know why that stuck out to me so much, but like just reading that literally gave me chills and thinking like, that is awful. I cannot imagine that. But anyways, I digress. So with that being said, I love you guys. I appreciate y'all so much. Make sure you are subscribed to the channel and have your notification bell turned on so you never miss a video. Remember, these are posted daily in real time, so make sure you're following along. You can always catch up if need be. Make sure to like the video and comment something that stuck out to you, maybe something you're getting from these. Heck, comment about verse 27 because I know I can't be the only one who was a little shook at those first few words, okay? But until then, I will see y'all tomorrow in the next Bible study. Bye.